Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from finally today, Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. We had snow for a couple of days. The nice thing about these mountains is in a few days, all the snow will be gone. So you get a nice blast of snow and you enjoy that winter weather. And then a few days later, you can be outside in a light T-shirt or even or maybe a sweatshirt. Okay, so I think we need to take a step back. There's so much going on in the world. I think we need to take a step back and look at so many things that are going on that are important, and they're not really dealt with, or they're just kind of mentioned, and then in the news and that people are more caught up with Hunter Biden and President Biden's classified documents in his garage by his Corvette, or Donald Trump's classified documents in his basement. I don't think we even want to get into it. I mean, we could talk about, well, what about Obama had all kinds of classified documents, like yada, yada, yada. It doesn't matter really in the larger scheme of things. I mean, yeah, it's relevant, but what about the bigger issues, the more important issues that basically go unseen? And so we're just going to mention that just lightly in the very beginning here. But then we're going to look at some of the other things in the course of human events that are so huge in comparison, but neglected. And not only that they're neglected, and we'll mention what some of them are, but also why they're neglected, and I think it's a very interesting study. Right now, some of the events that are going on, like there's basically a civil war going on in Mexico, and the cartels are trying to overthrow the government. And then the CIA is funding some of the cartels to fight the other cartels that are more powerful, because it's the more powerful cartels that are trying to overthrow the Mexican government. I mean, I've seen that mentioned in the news, but nowhere near to the extent that it's really relevant. Also, the rebellion in Brazil, and how United States and China, interestingly enough, both put this guy, who I understand is an ex-felon, into office, corrupt, and the really rightful president of Brazil lost. And now there's an uprising in Brazil because everybody knows the whole thing was a hoax, and they're upset about it. That's huge. Brazil is the only foothold in South America now that has any real chance at democracy. So we'll see what happens there. Russia and China are working together to try to create a gold-based currency to displace the US dollar as the currency of international trade. If that's happened, the US is devastated. I don't want to get into the economics here, but nevertheless, know that that is a major thing. Ukraine is in shambles. Russia is winning. You'll see on the news other things, but the truth is Russia is winning, if you can call that winning. Ukraine has been devastated, and that whole thing is a mess. The vaccines, the COVID vaccines, that's another fiasco. And it's really interesting. And this is really the point here, is that we have these mindsets, and we're not much interested in looking beyond them. We react with actually a violent, almost knee-jerk reaction. But if you listen to, just as using COVID as one example of all these different things, but COVID is one example, there are great scholars, great authorities in the field that are saying COVID's causing blood clots, and now we're seeing blood clots, and the statistics are there, and we're seeing it in young, healthy people that have been vaccinated. And you can't say anything. And the media has got its grips so deeply entrenched in the mentality of humanity that you just can't get through with these things. The pesticides that are being used, there are technologies where we could fertilize. Scotty, I think you know more about this than I do, but there are technologies that can be used to facilitate the growth of crops and everything that aren't so detrimental to the land.
Yeah, we
But it
know some
just,
people that have been trying for years, but they've been fighting with Monsanto and some of the others. And also,
yeah,
I've
again,
heard,
it's the big corporations that just step on the whole thing. The technology is there.
well, and most of the raw materials and everything are coming from like places like Ukraine for it. So
Yeah,
there's a huge shortage of actual, even the bad fertilizer right now.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Uh, the whole thing with the genetic engineering and the problems that that's causing, and the potential problems that just intuitively so many people are like, that can't be good to go in there and slice up the DNA. Long-term studies, of course, haven't been done because that technology hasn't been available that long, but yet they're proceeding to do it to all the crops, corn and everything else. It's the whole thing is just a mess. Um, Global warming. Do you know the only research that's being funded in the universities now, the only way you can get a grant is if you're doing a study that supports the notion of human beings causing global warming. Uh, Aside from whether or not that's true, if it's true or if it's not true, nevertheless, research should be open to explore the whole field from both sides, but it's not. It's not. Um, And so, what is it? I heard a very interesting, I believe, from Christ. I mean, how do you know what Christ really said when all this stuff was written down 400 years after he was crucified? But, the quote is really beautiful. He says, "We have to be made new in the attitude of our mind." That's a great quote. To be righteous and holy. Of course, the problem with righteous and holy is what Christ probably meant. I'm sure he meant, I just feel that way. Uh, and how it's interpreted can be two different things. Uh, what he was talking about there is people have to align with natural law, their own true nature, uh, the unified field, the Veda, meaning nature itself, Chaitanya, Bhavati Tam, all these different Sanskrit terms. Uh, and in that context, it's such a beautiful quote. We need to be made new in attitude of our mind. And by and large, and we've talked about this, the whole indoctrination of the mind and attitude and mentalities and who captures the mind. That's the problem. Bell, I don't know if you know Bell's theorem. Scotty, Bell's theorem is the idea that two electrons, and no matter how far apart they are, when one changes, the other instantaneously
flips.
changes. And there was really basically one experiment that was done to support that. And now it's coming out that experiment can be explained in terms of pure basic Newtonian classical physics. You don't need these elaborate quantum mechanical theories and stuff. It was a classical phenomenon, not a quantum mechanical one. And it all had to do with the angle of the filters. And, we don't need to get into that, but just know that it can be explained. And it's been presented. But I mean, just imagine if you're a physicist that's invested your entire career into Bell's theorem And then all of a sudden, some simple little classical, really high school mathematics, trigonometry explanation refutes everything you've been doing. And then the Big Bang and this idea that there are all kinds of galaxies out there, much older than the Big Bang could possibly allow for. And again, physicists have invested their whole career, their whole life into this thing, so they don't let it go that easily. And we're like that in so many things that just are across the board. Politics, Democrats versus Republicans, Russia versus Ukraine, China versus the United States. It goes on and on about how people are dug in to their worldview, to their perspective, and that's what they believe, that's what they support, that's what they attempt to impose upon other people. And whoever has control of the media and social media and all that is the one that controls the minds of the people, and the people buy into it. And once they buy into it, then their heels are dug in and you get nowhere. Somebody made an interesting comment to me, I think it was just yesterday. We were talking about the elections and Trump and Biden. And sadly, he made a very good point. He said that the mentality of humanity now, of the country, is so entrenched into, hating one party or hating the other party, that it's almost like, even if one of those guys was God's gift to man, I'm not saying they are, but even if one of them was, there's such dislike towards that individual that we'd almost be better off, let's just find somebody new. Let's find a couple of good candidates from both sides and run them and maybe start fresh, which is a very interesting thing. Also now, well, we can get into religion. We've talked about that. But again, religion becomes the same way. Just as I was talking about a minute ago, being righteous and holy. We have our ideas of what that means, and our heels are so dug in that even introducing the idea that, hey, there's this idea of natural law. What is that they say, God is the one that gives us our freedom, not the government, and that's getting closer to the idea that there's just natural law. There are ways of being as human beings that are just natural, inherent to our very nature. And a government that governs well supports that process. It doesn't try to say that, the government creates the laws. But we're so far away from, okay, what does that really mean? What does it really mean? What is nature? Really, if we were functioning in harmony with nature, what would that really look like? And then we get off on la la land tangents with it. And, I don't want to repeat this stuff that, well, it's, what's that expression that, from a Bob Dylan song, I think it was, if dogs run free, why can't we? I mean, that's not natural law. There's a certain dignity and decorum in that, but we're so far from comprehending that we would rather think that there's a set of rules that, and we abide by those rules. And that's what it means to function in accordance with natural law. Because if we turn ourselves over to our own nature, who knows what it could be. Kind of like that African Queen movie with Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, when Bogart was just rough, tumbled guy, and Katharine Hepburn was very proper and dignified. And he said, well, she was criticizing him for drinking, I think it was. And he said, well, it's just my nature. And she said, your nature, sir, is what you've come to this earth to overcome. I mean, what a horrible notion. Our nature is divine, but we're just not hanging on to that very well at all. We just move into other worldviews, and we cling to the worldviews that we've been indoctrinated into, and that's it. Now, there's this TV series, and it's actually quite interesting. It's called Ancient Aliens, and they attribute almost everything good about ancient times to the aliens came here and landed and gave us all this knowledge. First of all, aliens, this universe is huge. There are other species out there that are very advanced. People debate whether or not they've actually visited this earth, and people give different arguments based on our current level of understanding of why it's not possible because they're too far away. But that's based on our current level of understanding. And again, we become, our perspective, our worldview is the right one. Every culture thinks that. Every society thinks that throughout history. Everybody has thought that, the Vikings thought that, and Genghis Khan thought that, everybody thought that, and we think that today. We're not really able to get past the level of our technological advancement in any really, I mean, majorly significant way. To entertain the possibility that, hey, maybe that technology is there and maybe people have it. Maybe they have landed here. But the point is that we also radically understand ancient cultures. They're starting to discover now. We thought civilization started a few thousand years ago, 5,000 years ago with the Sumerians or whatever. Now they're discovering incredible sites. Punapunku, how do you say it? Pumapunku, Tawanaku, which is Teotihuacano. People pronounce these things different. But the point is that those things were constructed in a manner that we can't even begin to understand. The detail of the laser-like precision of the cutting of the stones and the 200-ton blocks and all this. We don't know how they did it. But instead of saying, okay, there was an ancient civilization that knew things that we don't know, we're more inclined to say the ancient aliens landed thousands of years ago and gave us that knowledge. And I'm not interested in debating, well, was it the aliens or did they have ancient technologies? I'm saying that we become so egocentric and so egotistical about what we think we know right now, and we're living in a very small world, and that applies across the board. But the thing is that whole thing is now shaking at the rafters. People are seeing too much on the internet and too many different insights and television programs, and it's becoming obvious that we don't really have nearly the answers that we think we do, and we don't have to become great. We will become greater when a little humility kicks in. Humility is the flip side of wisdom. It's okay to say we don't know and to move forward. And, I've heard it said that, oh, well, if there ever did turn out to be ancient, aliens from other planets that would completely blow Christianity out of the water. What are they talking about? It would expand our appreciation of religion. It would expand our appreciation of Christianity. It would expand our understanding of what the Christ, Chaitanya, Bhavatitam, what that really means, and how vastly more all-encompassing it is than what we even comprehended. You see? Another thing about gods and the angels and the fairies and all that stuff. Pele, the volcano in Hawaii is erupting, and they talk about the goddess Pele. How do we if we're just innocent, and what I mean by innocent, I mean if we're just not so indoctrinated by the narrow view that we've been conditioned to see things as, if we're just innocent, in other words, if we allow the greater nature, the expanded nature of what it means to be human, what it means to be living in harmony with nature, then it becomes really obvious that, yeah, there's a personified correlate to that volcano. There's a personified correlate to a cloud. There's a personified correlate to a tree. Personified correlates are all over the place. And like these different myths that talk about how the earth started. I mean, the Hopis have theirs and the Hindus have theirs. And the thing is, those are all superimposed, simultaneously valid, but contradictory slices through the same one pie. It's not like one's right and the other's wrong. I'm not saying that all those myths are valid. Some myths are not just make-believe, they're real. But there are many, many that are real. But again, we have a narrow, limited view of things that compromises our ability and our willingness to even comprehend that, even imagine that. And it's a shame. It's a shame. But now what is happening? This all can sound like, oh, what a horrible time it is. And we're living in such a tragic time. People don't believe in miracles. And what even is a miracle? A miracle is just an implementation of a technology that we have no comprehension of. Like Einstein said, there's only two ways to look at miracles. Either nothing is a miracle or everything is. Now, what was it? Either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. There are things, and there is knowledge out there, things that we call miracles. But we need to become open. That's one great thing about living in India for a while and seeing some of the things that I saw, and even that group of people from that mountain in the Himalayas where nobody can go. And then these people from that mountain appear to these Kumbh Melas once every 12 years or whatever. They don't know how they got there. They don't see them traveling. They just kind of appear. And anyway, these are all tangents, and I have tons of those things. Maybe we should do a podcast sometime about all the incredible things. At any rate, and then it gets off on superstition. And again, there's expanding your awareness, expanding your openness, and there's also going off on la land tangents. And all too often, once people start to open to something deeper, then they go off on tangents, and then they're off and running, and they're gone. They're just gone. They're just la land bogus, At any rate, what is good is that with the whole, on all levels, political, geopolitical, international, financial, moral, all these different levels, things have gotten so crazy across the board that what's happening now is people are taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, this is nuts. We've got to get back to the roots. We've been way out on a limb. We got to work our way a little closer to the trunk, to Mother Nature, and start to get a more realistic relationship with where morality comes from, Bhavati Tam, Chaitanya, the Christ. Where principles of economics come from, what it means to educate our children, what it means, and how to do that wisely. It's not just a no holds barred. And the good news is that's what's happening. I've got an article, and we're trying to figure out how to post it. Scotty, maybe you know better. Did you see that? It's a big, long article from a Jyotishi that's just outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to have to figure out a way to get that posted, because I think it's too long for the blog, Scotty.
Okay, I'll try.
All right. And you can work with Mary on that in the office, okay? And we'll get that thing posted. But you ought to read it, really. michaelmamas.net in today's post, and it'll be up for a long time. You'll see it listed there. And do take time to read that article. It's super. And then there's also Hans Dekaz, who I've talked about in the past. He's that numerologist, incredible, completely, unrelated to what we're talking about here in Jyotish and stuff, but nevertheless, it corresponds beautifully to the article and what we've been saying about phase transition going on, and how he was saying that 1,000 years from now, they're going to look back at this time as a time of transition from an era of complete oblivion to an era of, a golden age, an enlightened age. And I think the amazing thing is that these things so correlate that they're so not connected. And of course, Lord Krishna telling Mother Divine, and then you've got that we're at this time 5,000 years ago. He said in 5,000 years that was going to happen. And then you've got the Mayan calendar, and they're trying to understand what does it mean, when it ended and starts a new phase transition. So there's so much that supports it, but we can forget all of that and just look at it as common sense. The world has gone nuts. People are seeing it. The grassroots know it. It's not going to last much longer. Over the next couple of years or whatever, there's going to be a transition to a golden age where things make sense, where things are healthy, where people prosper. And I know that it's tough for a lot of people these past couple of years and the next year or two, but hang in there, because the reality, and in retrospect, we will realize we are so fortunate to live at this time, because we will see the transition from oblivion to an age of wisdom and enlightenment. Okay, Scotty, anything else?
No, I think you said it.
Okie doke. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Do read that article when it comes up. Scotty will figure out a way to get it posted. It might be in the comments, or I don't know how we're going to let you know. But all these blogs at michaelmamas.net, we have a place where there are comments. And if nothing else, the instructions how to find that article will be posted there. All right, we'll let you know, and thanks so much for listening.